Okay, so as I said, welcome to the Getting into Tech session. My name's Penny. I'm one of the career consultants in the career service at the University of Manchester. Today, we're going to be focusing on an overview of the tech sector, and I've got some slides to share with you. But I've also invited along 7 of our alumni who are all working in the tech sector. And really during this session, you'll have an opportunity to ask your questions to them, to get advice, to get tips, ask them how they did it. So I'm going to share some slides, and if you have got any questions throughout the session, please do submit those through the chat function. So just it's a slideshow. Fabulous. Okay, so first thing I would like to ask you to do is just to register your attendance if that's possible. There's a QR code there. It is important that you register so that I can send the slides out to you afterwards as well, after today's session. So please do either use the QR code there, or indeed there's that bit.ly link there, www.bit.ly, and that's /career-attend. And this is the Getting into Tech session. So I'll just leave that up for a moment or two. Anyone that's just joined, if you want to ask any questions throughout the session, please use the chat function. So registration, and I'll come back to this at the end in case you haven't had a chance to do that. One thing just to say before we do start, we are an inclusive service, an inclusive university, and we know that you will all experience different challenges, different ways of engaging with us in the career service. So I would just like to remind you, if you have got any additional needs or queries, or indeed worried about recruitment processes, please do arrange to talk to one of the team. We're based in the atrium, that's on the first floor in University Place. Okay, so this is what we're covering today. I'm going to do some introductions in a moment with the panel. We're then going to look at some kind of sector information, things for you to kind of be aware of, and then I'm going to bring our panellists back in to talk to you a little bit more about what they do, and that's your opportunity to ask them questions. As I said before, please use the chat box to submit your questions. If you wanted someone in particular to answer your question, you want to direct it at a particular panellist, if you just pop their name for the question, that would be amazing. So we've got around about 50 minutes for today's session, and I'm hoping it's going to be really useful for you in terms of finding out more about the tech sector. So the tech sector. I mean, the first thing to say, it's absolutely huge. It's a growing economy. And according to Tech Nation's UK Tech in 2020, I know it's a couple of years ago now, but they estimated around 3 million people were working in tech in the UK. And it's one of those areas that is growing. So I imagine actually since the end of 2020, it's probably increased since then. So it's around about 11% increase in that 2-year period at the end of 2020. So I haven't got exact figures at the moment around that sector, but I know our panellists are in those sectors, so perhaps they've got some sort of information to share with regard to their companies. I think it's fair to say the tech sector, it was growing anyway, but particularly the pandemic really made companies think about how they deliver their services. And there's a lot of digital transformation that took place during lockdown, because companies, organisations still had to deliver their goods, their services. So I know certainly at the university, maybe 1 or 2 of the kind of advisors would have done Zoom interviews before lockdown, but then the whole service went digital during that time. So that kind of opportunity, I guess, really, to get into tech roles has massively expanded. So what kind of companies are out there? And I will show you some of the company names that some of our graduates go on to. But in terms of the type of companies, there's lots of different companies. There's the big corporates that you will all know and be sort of recognise. But also there's a lot of small and medium-sized companies out there who employ graduates. They also employ students on placements and internships. So if you are thinking about getting experience before you hit the graduate labour market, it's definitely worth thinking about what kind of companies are out there. So we've got tech companies, who, as I've said there, sort of deal with programming, consultancy, networking. And again, there'll probably be some big brand names out there that you're aware of. We've also got tech innovators. So they're at the kind of forefront of research development. And I've got a couple of the company names on there that you may recognise. But don't forget as well that most companies have tech teams or rely on technical people. So, for example, at the university, we've got a huge digital team based in Kilburn House, in Kilburn Building. So, you know, we've got lots of people working in tech that aren't necessarily in tech companies. So do be aware of that when you are thinking about your future, thinking about looking for jobs. It doesn't have to necessarily be a tech company that employs you. So I mentioned some of the kind of companies. This is not a definitive list by any means, but these are some of the companies that target the University of Manchester and recruit our students on a regular basis. And I might just add here, it's not just computer science students working in tech roles. In fact, most of these companies are very, very interested in STEM students, but also actually students that don't come from a STEM background, but perhaps have a real interest, real passion for tech. So please don't feel that if you're not studying computer science, these companies won't be interested in you. That's not the case at all. They will look at your kind of interests, activities that you're doing alongside your studies. Okay, so what's it like? And I really hope our panellists will be able to give even more insights into what it is like working in tech in a few minutes. But typically we see our graduates earning a higher than average salary compared to other disciplines. So when you are looking at job vacancies, whether it's an internship, a graduate role, you will see that they're typically higher than other job areas. Quite often you'll be involved in a project or some sort of task, so it's very sort of outcome driven. You'll be working in an area that's constantly changing, so you may need to retrain, you may need to develop your own technical skills, and it may even mean doing courses in your own time. Lots of companies are really good at offering training and development as well, so you know, don't feel like everything has to be done in your free time. As I said before, we've got the big corporates that tend to recruit lots of our students, but also don't forget small and medium-sized companies too. And if working for yourself really appeals, well, then the tech sector definitely has those opportunities. We have a lot of people working self-employed or freelance, and some people really like the freedom of that, sort of working from contract to contract. So again, you've got perhaps lots of flexibility in the type of employer and the type of contracts that you work on. So in terms of STEM students, so if you've got a STEM background, quite often it's about looking at, you know, the skills that you've got already, but also those transferable skills. I will be sharing these slides afterwards, so please feel free to kind of look through this and think about some of the kind of skills that you've got already, but also if there's any gaps that you feel employers are asking for that you haven't got yet, think about upskilling. So if you're a non-STEM student, as I said before, there are lots of companies who will employ students without a computer science background, maybe physics or maths. You may have a humanities background. And I think as long as you're demonstrating and doing things about your passion in tech, that you're perhaps involved in hackathons, boot camps, etc., you know, that's the sort of stuff that will help you stand out as a potential candidate. Okay, I have got some links on here that I'm going to share with you. As I say, well, if you've registered for the event, I'll make sure the slides get out to you. But there's some really useful information on here, and you can do some further research after the session today. So at that point, I'm going to be quiet and I'm going to introduce our panellists today. So all of our panellists are alumni. They're all Manchester graduates, and they are all working in the tech sector. So if it's okay, I'll just go through and ask each of our panellists to introduce themselves. So Ahmad, could I ask you to start if that's possible?
Yeah, sure. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ahmed Kafar. I graduated from University of Manchester in 2019 with a bachelor's in computer science. And I currently work for a company called Deliveroo as a software engineer too. And my team is responsible for networking, edge, and compute. And we also look at some of the security stuff that goes around in the company. So like creating tooling and also basically managing all the cybersecurity side. So that's me. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Ahmed. Isabella, could you go next if that's possible?
Yep. Hi, my name is Isabella Shaw. I studied computer science bachelor's, graduating this year. My current role, I am a software engineer at Recyclever, which is a reverse vending machine manufacturer. We are based in Stoke-on-Trent. A reverse vending machine is a machine that's designed to facilitate the recycling of drinks containers, and it could be used to implement deposit return schemes, which essentially you return a container and you get a reward back. And we have an RVM behind us.
Amazing, I love that. That's great. Thanks, Isabella. Mustafa.
Oh yeah, hello everyone. My name is Mustafa. I studied computer science, BSc, and advanced computer science for my master's, MSc. I work for a pretty little team, and I'm a mobile developer, React Native engineer at very little team. So I'm in charge of the mobile app. We're all used to order clothes from PLT. So, yeah.
That's great. Thanks so much, Mustafa. Mo?
Hey, I'm Mo. I did an MPhil, Master of Physics, at the University of Manchester, graduated last year. And then I joined a company called Terra Quantum. It's a Swiss company looking into quantum computing as a service. And I'm developing algorithms for quantum computers. So, yeah.
That's great. Thank you. Sounds really interesting. Akash?
Hi everyone, I'm Akash. I studied computer security as a master's at Manchester, and I joined the mobile company as a quality assurance tester. So I tested websites for bugs and stuff and security, and that's it mostly. Back to you, Penny.
Thank you. And last but not least, Zane.
Hi all. So I graduated with Isabella in July, and I started working at Apple in August as a software engineer. Specifically, I'm working in performance optimization and security and compilers at Apple.
Great, that's fantastic. Thank you very much, Zane. So we've just had a really brief introduction from the panel. I'm sure you want to ask them lots more questions. I've got a couple here that have been sent to me to ask. So if you have got questions about perhaps even the company they're working for, what do they do day to day? What are the kind of challenges of the job? You know, please submit those questions in the chat. So I've got a couple of questions here. And for those of you that have masters, have done master's qualifications, so postgraduate qualifications, was that a requirement for the job, or was it something you did after you started work? Mo?
Yes, it certainly was the company I joined actually wanted a PhD, but because of the master's project that I did at University of Manchester, it was very relevant and they took me in anyway. But deep tech sector, they usually want PhDs and masters.
Yeah, great. Thanks very much, Mo. So that was a requirement, but in fact, the PhD was a requirement, but they accepted you on your master's project. Okay, I haven't got all your profiles up, so you'll just have to pop your hands up if you've done a master's. And was it a requirement for the role that you did or are doing now? Anyone else done a master's?
Yeah. Mine really wasn't a requirement, but my master's project was related to what tech stack that's being used in pretty little team, so it was an advantage. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, I guess the sector that you're in as well, that sounds like a really relevant project. That's brilliant. So anyone else with the masters?
Yeah.
Was it a requirement?
I did a master's. You go first.
Sorry, so I was going to say I've also got a master's degree. I graduated in 2017, but although it's not specifically a requirement for my current role, it did give me advantage during the interview process.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, helping you stand out, just giving that little bit extra to the employer. And Akash?
Yeah, so I also did a master's, but it wasn't a job requirement. I just really liked the subject, wanted to explore it more, and I did that. It does help in my role, but it wasn't a requirement, no.
Okay, that's great. Thanks for that. I've got a question here for Najib. What are you doing, and are you a postgraduate? So you just answered that, you are a postgraduate, but could you just clarify your role again?
Yeah, sure. I think we skipped our introduction, but it's fine. So yeah, I work for Rock City Studios. I'm one of the QA. I'm part of the QA team there. So I specifically help the devs with like diagnosing any issue that they have during development. So that's essentially my role in a nutshell.
That's great. Fantastic. Thank you very much. So I've got another question here. What was the biggest challenge in getting your first job, landing your first job? Ahmed, can we hear from you on that one?
Yeah, sure. So obviously it was a quite journey going through getting the first job. So obviously the biggest challenge would be to probably cover all sorts of different requirements that a company has. So some companies would go with the graduate scheme and they don't really require any coding tests and so on, but some do. So I started working for the Hut Group, which is local to Manchester, and they did require a lot of coding tests and so on. So one of the challenges was actually just doing a lot of lead code and then basically getting up to speed with everything. So yeah, that's at least the challenge I had. So, yeah. And also there's a lot of different processes. Sometimes you have to go over situational judgment tests and so on. So there's a lot of different types of tests that you need to understand and be good at. So those the challenges really.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Ahmed. Yeah, I think, we get a lot of feedback from the bigger employers. They do tend to have lots of stages to their recruitment process. So getting familiar with those, practicing. Just out of interest, Ahmed, did you manage to practice your sort of testing before you did it with the company with THG?
Yes, so I did obviously. There's a couple of websites you can go with HackerRank and LeetCode. So for my coding tests, I mainly went over them and covered the medium-ish questions, and then for some of the other ones I did read a lot of different there's a lot of online resources that you can go over. So YouTube I would say is one of the best really. So there's a lot, everything is there. And also I went through some of the career service seminars as well when I was going through the process, so that was quite beneficial as well. So yeah, it's a lot to take in, but it's worth it. I think it helps throughout the career really.
Lovely.
Okay.
Thanks so much, Ahmed. Isabel, what about you? What was the biggest challenge you faced in sort of landing that first job?
I definitely agree with everything that was just said. I would add to that the complications of finding the right location and everything. It's really complex when you're tied by location or some other factor to try and get the right role. And I would also, definitely agree with navigating the different processes. Different companies want completely different things. Some of the tests I did were really easy and I was confused as to why they were so easy, and others were so hard that I just sat there clueless. Some companies wanted 3-4 stages of interviews and hours of your time. Others wanted half an hour, so fitting all of that in, that was really, really difficult, I would say.
Yeah. How did you manage that? How did you manage that time?
I started applying for roles at probably the middle of my final year, because I'd started panicking that I didn't have a role and I didn't have support from anybody financially. So I had to support myself since I graduated. So it was really important for me to find a role quickly. And I came towards my final exams and I realized that I hadn't got anything yet, and I was like, oh gosh, I don't have time anymore. I'm going to have to just apply to everything I can. So I went on one big interview day that was my last shot at a sort of big company, and I just wasn't feeling like any of them were my thing. And so I mass applied. I mass applied and I put myself out there. I tried to build my network on LinkedIn. I put my CV out there, and the role that I've got, I didn't actually try to apply for. It was a recruiter who contacted me, and I went through that interview process, and I had 3 offers to choose from in the end because I'd applied to so many. I did about 10 interviews in 1 week, which I would not recommend. I spread myself too thin, and but I was really lucky to be able to choose the one that was most suitable for me. I did compromise on, I chose lower salary but better fit, which I'm happy with so far.
Great, fantastic. That sounds really intense, actually, sort of leaving it and really, like you say, maths applying. But you got the result in the end. On that point you made about LinkedIn, so all of our panelists today are on LinkedIn. In fact, that's how I connected with them and got them involved in today's session. So please do connect with them. Their names there are on the screen. Maybe get another window up, get on LinkedIn and do connect with our colleagues here today. Zane, what was the biggest challenge you faced landing your first role, or the role you're in at the moment?
So it was two. One is the thing that I'm working in is very niche. Like in computer science, for example, there's like one small module about compilers. So getting into this is a bit hard. Also, the interview process. So I don't know how the interview process is at Apple, but it's like my team did a lot of interviews. So I went through probably like 5 and then 5 other interviews for behavioral and like managerial things. It was more, I think, like informal. There was like some tech questions related to what I worked in, but most of it I just spoke to everyone in my team and then everyone in like the hierarchy until like the person who's responsible for all of the department. Yeah, I think there is a question about the summer internship, and yeah, it helps. Uh, I did an internship at ARM. It's not absolutely necessary. I know a lot of people who got in without an internship, but for me, I worked at ARM as an intern in the summer before my 3rd year, and it was related to compilers. So when I didn't get an offer from ARM, I started just applying for places that are looking for compilers. Like I applied to 2 places. There was Apple and there was Qualcomm in the US, and yeah, I ended up with one offer from Apple. So yeah, it is really good to reach out to people, and like there is a lot of meetings, like for example developer meetings. In compilers there's something called the LLVM developer meeting, which is happening today until like the end of the week. There is a bunch for like maybe C++ or like some language or some like AI. So there is these things, and usually companies are looking for people around these times. I just emailed someone. I didn't even formally apply to Apple.
Wow, fantastic. And Zane, would you be able to just maybe pop a link to that in the chat for the students today? Is that possible?
Yeah, sure.
That's
think
amazing.
it's online, should be.
That's great. Okay, so I'm going to move on because we have got other questions here. So did any of you do a summer internship in the 2nd year? So I'm assuming that's the kind of penultimate year. Some of our students do 4-year programs. And if so, where did you go? What did you do? When did you apply? And what helped you stand out? So did any of you do a summer internship the penultimate year? Let's see. No, all shaking your heads. No, it's okay.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Mustafa, sorry. Oh no, sorry, Mo.
Yes. So I was working part-time for a company during the year, and they kind of kept me for an internship during both my 2nd and 3rd year. And that certainly helps, I guess, in the sense that you can go out and tell the company you're applying to after graduating. You can say that, look, I've got some professional experience, I've got experience delivering things. But most of the people I'm working with haven't done that. So if you haven't done it, no worries at all. So yeah, it's not a requirement by any stretch of imagination.
Yeah. So it's not always a requirement to have an internship when you're applying to companies, but it is helpful to talk about things you've done outside of your degree. So if you've had positions of responsibility, for example, if you've been a pass leader or coordinator, something like that looks really great. If you've been taking part in hackathons or any sort of boot camps in your free time. So absolutely do sell your degree, your course, your program, the kind of research projects you've been doing, but also do think about what else have you been doing outside of your degree, because that does also help you stand out. Okay, that's great. Thanks for sharing that, Mo. Appreciate that. So I've got a question here. I'm doing a master's degree, but I have not started my dissertation project. And I don't know if any of you were in this position yourself, but how can I explain that in an interview? So you actually hadn't finished your final year project before you started applying. Were any of you in that situation? If so, how did you kind of explain that to the employer? How did you get that point across that you hadn't quite started your final year project, but you shared perhaps with them what you were planning to do? Did any of you do that during the application process?
I can answer that.
Akash?
Yeah.
So I wasn't in the situation where I hadn't started at all, but I was like at the planning phase of it. So I knew what project I was going to do, and I knew what I was going to do, but I hadn't done it yet. In my interview processes, which were also going on at the same time, I basically said, talked about my motivation behind the project instead of what I've actually done, because that's just like a very solid reflection of your character, of your thinking, and of your skills, even if you've not started doing anything yet. That's just advice I can give to you.
Yeah, that's great. That's a really great way of kind of putting that forward. The fact that you have thought about, you're planning it, it shows that you're organised and you actually thought about what you're going to do. Mustafa, were you in that situation as well?
Yeah, quite similar. Like Akash said, what I did was, for the role that I applied for, I knew my project was kind of like similar to what they were looking for. So I just had to make sure my project met some of the requirements. So when I was done with my project, I basically used the projects to apply for the job. So yeah, that gave me an advantage. Yeah,
that's great. Thanks for that. So hopefully that helps for that person that's in that situation.
Yeah.
Thanks to Isabella for doing a shout out for Duncan's Wednesday Waggle. So Duncan's in our employability lead for computer science, and he puts together a Wednesday Waggle newsletter. Every Wednesday that gets released, and it does highlight opportunities, boot camps, etc., that you can get involved in, part-time work experience, etc. That's great, lovely, and thanks, Zane, for popping that website in the chat. Okay, so I've got a couple of other questions here. And what is it that you like most about your job? Let's go over to Najib. What's the best thing about your job at the moment?
For me, it's like seeing the software I'm working on, like going from all the different stages of the project. So going from like planning phase all the way to development release is always such a satisfying feeling. Like I work in game development, so watching my previous games that have been released, get good reviews, and seeing people enjoying is always a great feeling as well. On top of that, and being able to say I've worked is always, people always think it's cool and all that good stuff.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Akash, what's the best part of your job?
That's a difficult one. There's many things to choose from. I'd say it's the freedom you get as a graduate, kind of. So like people don't have solid expectations from you. This is not applicable to every job, but you're kind of free to explore, shift roles, create your own role, just go explore whatever you want to. And it's kind of a very stress-free learning environment in the first few months. Again, not applicable to everyone, because I know some people are just like thrown into the deep end. But for me, the favorite part of my time at 3 was just like deciding what I want to do and what I like, and kind of exploring constantly. Yep.
Yeah, that's great. And having that opportunity as well with an employer that's so supportive, allowing you to experience and have that exposure. Ahmed, what about you, Ahmed? What's the best part of your job?
So similar actually. So there's a lot of like, obviously every company evolves, and they restructure every few couple of months, and for me it's at least the getting to learn new things, new technologies, and we basically do a lot of like exploration to ensure like we can manage the scale that we work on, and also it's essentially like learning new things and working with a lot of like intelligent people that are currently already working. So it just builds up like your knowledge as well. So for me at least, it's getting to work on new projects all the time, and then basically just helping in the design process, as well as like going over a lot of other things that we can, we get like time or every week basically that we can explore some of the things we can do to improve on our current infrastructure. So yeah, it's a lot of learning and a lot of exploration. So that's what I enjoy about the role.
Fantastic, thank you. There's a question here from Mo. You mentioned a PhD. Do you plan to do a PhD? And if so, what's your motivation for doing that?
Yeah, so my role currently is a research role. So it's very, very difficult for me to make that choice. Like I'm doing the same thing that I'd be doing if I did a PhD. And obviously it's a huge difference between the pay and so yeah, I've thought about it. I'm not exactly sure. Yeah, the main motivation behind it is that when you go into the industry, you're constantly pushed to create something for clients or for your customers or whatever. Whereas in PhD, you get to do like pure research just for the sake of the science behind it. So that's yeah. So yeah, it's a choice I've got to make maybe in a year or two.
Yeah, fantastic. It's great, isn't it, that you've got that option still, I guess, but there are implications, aren't there, like you say, about the money, time.
Yeah.
You know, it's a big commitment doing a PhD. Thanks for sharing that, Mo. So there's been another reference to the Wednesday Waggle, to Duncan's Wednesday Waggle, and I've got another question here about where did you find your job? So Wednesday Waggle was somewhere that that people used. Any other platforms that people used for job searching?
For me, my current job I found through LinkedIn. So going through the job list on LinkedIn, and eventually I found my current role and the role before that as well. But some of my early jobs I found through recruiters, like my graduate role that I originally did, I found through a recruiter, which was super helpful.
Right, that's interesting. Mustafa?
I would say LinkedIn. Yeah, LinkedIn helps a lot. I found my basically 2 jobs. I found it through LinkedIn, through recruiters on LinkedIn. So yeah, it does help a lot. Just create your profile, put in your portfolio, and the projects you've been involved with, and yeah, the recruiters will come looking for you.
Yeah.
I'm just going to put a link to Pretty Little Thing job openings on the chat. Yeah.
Fabulous. Thanks so much for that, Mustafa. And of course, Pretty Little Thing are local to the University of Manchester. So yeah, if you're thinking about staying in Manchester after graduation, you know, have a look at that website.
The fun part of it is fully remote, so you get to work from anywhere.
Oh, fantastic! Even better. Zain, where did you find your opportunities?
So yeah, there was LinkedIn. There's a website called GradCracker, which is like it's all STEM jobs. So if you're not even interested in like computer science or software engineering, there is a lot of mechanical or like electrical engineering jobs. Also, like from just experience and talking to friends, like I know sometimes like, oh, this company has an offer, like my friend applied. So you know, like in computer science especially, people talk about where they applied. So I just went with the places they went to. Around now is a really good time if you want to apply for the big companies. Most of them close by December, or like there's some that still recruit later, but for internships especially, it around now is really good. One advice as well, reach out to Duncan. I think even if you're not like a computer science student, because usually he will know someone who works at the company, or like he'll give you like some tips or advices about your CV, about your LinkedIn profile. So yeah, it's very important. Also, if you know someone like a company and you know someone who applied there or someone who works there, or even in LinkedIn, try to reach out and like ask for a referral, or like, oh, how did your interview went? It's very, very helpful. And it helped me a lot, for example, in other companies that I applied to. So yeah.
That's amazing. So plenty of references there to LinkedIn, to GradCracker, which is a STEM jobs platform. So yeah, do check out those resources. And of course, word of mouth, that's very much, I think, prevalent in the tech sector. You know, people you've worked with that have been great quite often get recommended for jobs. Ahmed, what about you? Where did you search for jobs? What platforms did you use?
So yeah, another shout out for the Ernest Waggle. That's quite helpful actually. So I found the company from Ernest Waggle, and we also had obviously the employers come into university as well for one of our projects, and as well as they regularly visit the university. So I spoke to some of the recruiters there, and then I applied to their website. But yeah, there's a lot of different roles that I've actually like still go through the Ernest Waggle, so it's pretty helpful. And yeah, and LinkedIn again, you can build your your connections, and you can basically ask recruiters directly, or if you apply there, LinkedIn will tell the recruiter about you as well. So it shares your profile with them. So it's quite helpful. And again, yeah, Grad Cracker is also good. So all the same really.
Fantastic, thank you. So I've got another question here. It says, apart from your degree, what else made you stand out on your CV? So what other things did you have on your CV that helped you stand out as a candidate apart from your degree? Zane, do you want to pick that one up?
Yeah, so the most important thing that helped me is like the internship that I did, but that's very specific to like the job that I did, because not a lot of people who work in compilers and not a lot of people get internships in compilers. So during my internship, I worked in open source, and then I contributed to something that ended up into the LLVM compiler, and I used that opportunity to talk about it, and like during interviews, I just like show them, oh, this is what I did, and it was also something related to what Apple does in the compilers, so it really helped. Also, in other things, for example, projects, I did some web development. I had some I did some apps. So even if they're not like mainstream or anything, but it helps to show, oh yeah, I did this. I know React. I know whatever. Yeah. Also, your third year project matters. If any one of you is a third year, even if you're not finished around now, you would be still reading papers or like reading more about it, and like people will notice, yeah, you're reading, you're up to date with tech, and a lot of the projects at Manchester are really cool. So like I did something related to machine learning. I know people who did things with spiking neural networks. There is like many things to pick from and to talk about.
That's great, thanks, Zane. Najib, what about you? In terms of your kind of attributes, what stood out apart from the course that you did?
For me, it's mostly my portfolio work. So I do have a couple of portfolio websites as well as a GitHub profile. So I tend to redirect people to there. So it gives a good talking point for potential employers. Sorry, and even in interviews, it's always a good way to like showcase your skills, talk through the project, and then by talking through the project is a good way to like further enhance, showcase your skills in that way.
Yeah.
So there's any very specific question like how do you do like X piece of code? I can always just direct them to my GitHub and do like a code talk.
Yeah, that's actually the next question here, actually, is about portfolios, digital portfolios. What platforms do people use if you've got one? So you mentioned GitHub, having a GitHub. Any others that you use?
I've got my own personal website as well, a couple of personal websites.
Brilliant.
That customized websites with their own unique URLs. So I tend to, one of them acts like a CV, the other one's more of a portfolio piece. So I tend to use them as a way of just basically showcase my skills.
Yeah, that's great. Anyone else? Anyone else got other platforms, digital portfolios?
Yeah.
Zane?
So if you're interested in anything to do with AI or machine learning, one good place is Kaggle. So you can be there, solve problems, and like it will help because it's similar to like you can say Stack Overflow, but more oriented into machine learning and AI. Another thing Isabella pointed out, the University Careers website. So actually, this is one of the most important websites because some companies advertise at the university website earlier than they do, to LinkedIn or to their actual website. And one of these companies is Bloomberg. So when I started applying, I just check, oh, the university, does it have a link for it? And also sometimes the link is unique, so they will know, oh, you're coming from Manchester, coming from that internal website, and you will have at least, maybe a better chance. But yeah, it's very important to check the university website as well.
Yeah, thanks for that, Zane. So what Zane's referring to there is Career Connect, which is where our employers upload their vacancies to. You can actually update your profile, so log in and you can set up actual job alerts. So if you were interested in Bloomberg, for example, you could put that in as a keyword, and then anytime they advertise, you'll get that notification to your inbox. So please do update your profile, get those job alerts set up. Thank you for that, Zane. Akash, what about you in terms of, do you have a digital portfolio? And if so, where do you keep it?
I keep it on GitHub. Pretty much that's it. Yeah. But just to go back to the last question, what helps you stand out in an interview? So I'm a master's student. I had a published paper from my last degree. That was a good topic to talk about. Yeah. So if you do have stuff like that, please talk about them. Employers love them. And that's it.
That's great, fantastic. Anyone else got any platforms for digital portfolios or where you store your stuff? Yeah, Isabella?
I'd like to approach it from the opposite angle, and that don't panic if you don't have one, because I didn't really have one. Everything from what I did at university was on GitLab, and I didn't really want to share it publicly because the coursework doesn't tend to change between the years. So I found that if somebody did want a portfolio, then I could send them a link to the GitLab that wasn't public. It was like a, invite or link only access. And a lot of people were happy enough with that. And again, to just tie into what you can do to stand out, I was self-employed, but in a completely different industry. And I could talk about the skills that I learned, like doing my own bookkeeping, accounts, and just even having the initiative to set yourself up as a freelancer. You don't have to earn loads of money at it. But if, for example, you're into arts and crafts, you can talk about that. Like, the thing is that, I'm at smaller companies, but a lot of the small companies, you're not going to be talking to a software engineer when you're being hired. You might be talking to somebody who's into STEM, but they might know nothing about technology. And that was my case where I am now. And quite, I would say about a third of them were like, recruitment people or like managers in the company, and they just wanted the right fit, because they'll teach you the rest. And so it's important that you also develop you as a person and include that in your portfolio and how you advertise yourself, create your own little brand of you, and work with that.
Do you know what? That's such great advice, Isabella, because I think in my experience, lots of STEM students really focus on the technical skills. Have I got Python, C++, particular languages or programming skills, and they forget about soft skills. They forget about communication or teamwork or problem solving, and that stuff is almost just as important quite often for employers, particularly if you're going to be a technical person working with non-technical people, and that ability to translate, to communicate what you're doing to people that aren't technical. So that's really great advice to share. Thank you for that. Okay, anyone want anything to add to what Isabella's just said?
Yeah, just a quick one. So I'd say, like, having a relevant CV definitely helps. So like if you're applying for a certain role, make sure it's don't make 10 pages of your CV, because they might not care about what half of the stuff is. So usually when I applied for anything, I made sure my CV was relevant to the actual job posting, and not lie, because in your CV you'll have to answer for everything. So I went to a lot of CV debugging sessions in the university, and I went to career services as well to get my CV checked and make sure I'm not putting random things that that doesn't really make any difference. So basically, I still have like one-page CV, by the way. So yeah, it's having a small, straightforward CV that's relevant to the jobs you're applying for definitely helps, because usually the first process is going through the CV and filtering out some of the candidates. So a good CV definitely makes a big difference.
Yeah, that's really great advice. And each role is different, so make sure you're tailoring that CV to each role. Thanks, Ahmed. Mo.
I'm just going to say this as well. Absolutely agree with both. I think your CV's got to be a mix of a lot of technical stuff that's really relevant to the job, but also some stuff that makes you stand out, and in terms of like what you are as a person to work with, or how you are as a person to work with, and all of your soft skills. I think I've been asked more questions about my. So I went to the society called Devil's Advocates, and I've been asked more questions about that than my master's project. So it's really relevant to put those things in, especially because there are two types of companies. There are the companies where you get directly connected to a software engineer or like to someone who's got direct experience with the technical stuff. But there are others where you got to speak to someone with no experience in the field first, and they've got to like you. Got to put some stuff they can talk to them about, and yeah. So
That's brilliant. Thank you for that, Mo. I've just been asked to share the QR code, so I'm just going to pop that on the screen, but there are a couple more questions being asked. So one of the questions here is about what you did at university. So during your time at university, what was the most useful thing that helped you with your first role? What was the most useful, I guess, skill or module perhaps? What sort of helped you most in that first job? Who wants to answer that?
I can go. So
Yeah, thanks, Akash.
like I think one of the most important things is to connect with students and with people in the university. You will not like computer science people will enter with a lot of programming experience, and there's people who do not know anything, but it's like it's very inspiring to talk to people because some people have a lot of knowledge and they're happy to share with you, and a lot of lecturers are the same. Like if you have any question or if you're curious about something in related to lecture materials, just go and ask. I think it's what pushed me to apply and go and like explore things in computer science, because for example my friend who's a year above me who was always applying to internships, so I know all of the company names, I know when to apply, when to what to do for interviews, what to do for coding interviews, because I was talking to a lot of people either a year above or like in the same year who were applying with me as well. So it really helps. Other than that, I think joining societies is really interesting. If you can do some hackathons, you can talk about these things like projects, initiatives, even like being a past leader or something like that. It really helps.
Yeah, thank you. So it's not just about the course content, it's about those extracurricular activities that really helped you. Fantastic. Thank you, Zain. Anyone else want to add to that about what sort of really helped them maybe talk to an interviewer about what did they do it, you know, maybe a module or maybe a particular skill? Isabella?
I would say hands down always just do every coursework that you can, even the formative ones. If you don't have the time or energy, then yeah, prioritize the work that counts towards your degree, but just do it all because it really helps with the process of problem solving, and also you're creating your portfolio work as we touched on before. I would say the most useful module realistically has been the software engineering modules from year 2 and the team projects, because they are the most realistic pieces of work that I did, and it's something as well that I could talk about in interviews, because a lot of universities don't focus on creating a realistic work environment within their courses, whereas the software engineering 1 and 2 modules did try to do that, and I did find it was a talking point. But I think any module you'll probably find something from it useful, even if it's a nugget of information.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for that, Isabella. So I'm just conscious of time. What I want to do is try and get some feedback on today's session, but I would like someone else to maybe pick up that question there. So Akash, did you didn't contribute to that one that time, did you? What stood out for you? What did you take away, I guess, from university that helped you with that landing that first role or that transition?
I'd say this goes to very soft skills, I guess, but time management.
Yeah.
Being at university, managing so many things, it also kind of ties into the question I was answering to James in chat. How do people find time? Time management, if you learn that at university, it 100% helps you during the interview process, because you're not going to give up your dissertation while you're interviewing. And also, once you land the role, it's all time management, like your whole day. So yes, that would be my key takeaway from my time at uni.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's really helpful. Is it time management is such a skill, being able to meet deadlines, meet expectations of your manager. It's all really important stuff in the world of work, and you do that. Hopefully you develop that skill whilst at university. We're going to finish off with James's final question, because we are almost at time. So how do people find time to work on all these side projects, soft skills, applications, and so on top of keeping on top of your degree work and chores? So thanks for sharing your tips there. Anyone else want to kind of feedback on that? Anyone else got strategies that they use to manage multiple deadlines, multiple pieces of work?
I'd like to say something about side projects. At our company, and I guess I've applied to a lot of companies, rejected from most. But I think what I've realized is that they don't really care too much about the side projects that you've done. They care about the core of like your degree, like if you've done a master's project or a dissertation, plus some personal traits or plus personal things that you do. For example, I listen to Eminem quite a lot, and I put down my CV, right? So it doesn't have to be a lot of side projects, that just put a few of your main things that you've done at uni in your CV and make them very embolden them and show that you care about them. But I don't think it's necessary to do a lot of soft side projects. When it comes to soft skills, I guess it's just something you develop doing group work, and you can probably, if you've done any sort of group team kind of work or sort of team projects, you can talk about that a little bit. So
yeah, that's great. So I think it's also about that awareness. You're busy doing all these assignments, research. Think about actually what skills am I developing during this piece of work, during this project. Lots of companies want you to be able to collaborate, to work with other people. Now, most of you are developing that skill through your projects or through extracurricular activities. So I guess just be aware of those skills that you're developing. Any other tips on time management?
I think one most important thing is don't just do a project just for the sake of I want a project on my CV. It's also you have to think about that university is the priority, so you cannot go and I want to do a project because I don't have anything. You will have things because you'll have your university projects anyways. First year is really good because you'll have more time if you are a first year. Second and third is you'll have less and less time. In summer as well, you can have enough time to learn things, and this is something that helped me. For example, I was really curious about mobile development and web development. So during summer after first year, I just sat and learned JavaScript, learned React Native, and then built an application. But it stemmed from the idea that I really wanted to learn about web development, and I've been putting it off for so long. So yeah, and then at the end, it's not even on my CV, but just I learned from it, and then I realized that the university project seemed more interesting, and I did more interesting things than that. And if you are interested in something, then go for it. But you just don't overwhelm yourself. You don't need to join a billion societies and 3 million leadership positions if you just have no interest in them.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Do things you're passionate about. That then makes you create time, doesn't it, for those projects, those pieces of work.
Sorry, there's a quick expand upon that before we finish. So yeah, even on top of that, if there's a particular aspect of your degree or course that you're interested in, you can always expand your knowledge upon that specific area rather than trying to do 50 billion projects in one go. But at least that'll be relevant towards what you're studying, and on top of that, it shows potential employers that, oh hey, this is something you're passionate about, you're genuinely interested in, and it shows that you've done something beyond outside of uni as well, but it's still relevant to your course. So that's one way to tackle without being overwhelmed.
Yeah, that's brilliant advice to finish off with. So we're kind of at the hour now, so thank you so much for all your questions. It's been really interesting stuff raised. I'm hoping that most of you had your questions answered. I know there's one or two we've had to miss. What I would suggest is either reach out to me if I can be of help. Please contact me either through the university email system or on LinkedIn. Please connect with our panelists that have been kind enough to give up their time to talk to you today. Perhaps they'd be willing to answer some of your questions as well if you follow up with them. I would like some feedback on today's session, so there's a QR code and a bit.ly link there. If you haven't had a chance just to give us some feedback on today's session, please do that before we finish up, because I'd like to know if this sort of stuff's worthwhile, if it's worth doing these sorts of things again. And just a massive thank you to our panelists and alumni for coming along today and talking with us about their own experiences. I think they've provided some really valuable insight, advice, and some great tips on how to manage, your time, how to impress employers. So huge thanks to them. And of course, please do use the resources we've mentioned, LinkedIn, Career Connect, etc. And take action, do stuff today. Don't just think about it, go away and do stuff. Okay, we'll finish off there. And once again, thank you. And I am recording today's session, as I mentioned at the beginning, so I will be uploading this to YouTube in the next day or two. So if you want to go back or if you want to share this with friends, please feel free to do that. And for now, I will say goodbye and best of luck with your future. Thank you.
Thank you, Penny.
Thanks a lot, everyone. Thanks so much to our panelists. You